As the rain falls softly outside, the world grows still, and the shadows of the past begin to stir. In the quiet of the night, stories of betrayal, ambition, and unspeakable acts whisper through the darkness. Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where we unravel the chilling truths of true crime, each tale a glimpse into the abyss of human nature. Tonight, in Volume 14, we bring you 11 stories that will linger in your mind long after the rain fades. From corridors of power to the streets of despair, these cases will pull you into a world where justice is never certain. Close your eyes, let the storm carry you, and step into the shadows. Our first story begins in a city of steel, where a brilliant mind faced a fall that would echo through history. Part 1. The Fall of Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, United States, January 2006. In the winter of 2006, draped Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in a shroud of frost and unease. The city, forged in the fires of industry, was no stranger to resilience, but nothing could prepare it for the scandal about to unfold. At its heart stood a man whose name was both a beacon of truth and a lightning rod for controversy. Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, a forensic pathologist whose brilliance had reshaped the science of death, revered by some as a champion of justice, reviled by others as a man consumed by ambition. Wecht was about to face a reckoning that would test the boundaries of power, loyalty, and morality. This is the story of his fall. A tale of genius, greed, and a question that haunts us still. Was this justice, or was it vengeance? Cyril Wecht was a force of nature. Born in 1931 to Jewish immigrant parents in Pittsburgh's gritty Hill District, he rose from modest roots to become a titan in forensic science. His intellect was razor sharp, his ambition boundless. Armed with degrees in medicine and law, he was a rare breed, a scientist who could hold his own in the courtroom, unraveling mysteries the dead left behind. As Allegheny County's coroner, a role he held intermittently since the 1970s, he transformed a backwater office into a powerhouse of forensic inquiry. His work on high-profile cases, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the death of Elvis Presley, the O.J. Simpson trial, made him a household name. He was the man who dared to challenge official narratives, whose voice carried the weight of truth. But truth, as Wecht would learn, comes at a cost. By the early 2000s, Wecht's star shone brighter than ever, but shadows were gathering. His private consulting firm, Cyril H. Wecht and Pathology Associates, was a gold mine, offering expert testimony for fees that turned heads. To his admirers, it was a natural extension of his expertise. To his detractors, it was a dangerous conflict of interest, a public official profiting from the very system he served. Whispers began to circulate in Pittsburgh's political circles. Wecht, they said, was blurring lines, using his coroner's office to fuel his private empire. Employees murmured about late nights spent on his personal cases, county resources diverted to his gain. The rumors grew darker, more insidious, until they reached the ears of those with the power to act. On January 20th, 2006, the storm broke. U.S. Attorney Mary Beth Buchanan, a prosecutor known for her unrelenting pursuit of corruption, stepped before a sea of cameras and delivered a bombshell. Dr. Cyril H. Wecht was indicted on 84 counts of fraud, theft, and abuse of public office. The charges were a gut punch, each one more shocking than the last. Prosecutors alleged Wecht had turned his office into a personal fiefdom, using county vehicles, staff, and equipment to run his private business. They claimed he billed the county and private clients for the same work, pocketing thousands in a brazen scheme. But the accusation that sent chills through the city was the most grotesque of all. Wecht, they said, had traded unclaimed cadavers from the county morgue for access to university laboratory facilities. The image was horrifying. A man of science bartering the dead for profit. When Buchanan's voice was steady as she addressed the press, "This is not about politics," she declared. "This is about a public official who systematically exploited his position for personal gain." The words echoed like a death knell, a challenge to Wecht's legacy. Pittsburgh was stunned. Wecht was a fixture, a man whose charisma and intellect had won him allies from the courtroom to the classroom. His supporters rallied, crying foul. They pointed to his decades of service, his groundbreaking contributions to forensic pathology, his mentorship of countless scientists. To them, the charges were not justice, but a vendetta, orchestrated by a Republican administration stung by Wecht's outspoken criticism of President George W. Bush. Wecht, a proud Democrat, had never shied away from controversy, whether debunking government reports or championing progressive causes. Was this, they wondered, a political assassination dressed as law? The case became a battleground, pitting Wecht's defenders against a prosecution determined to tear him down. Buchanan's team painted a damning picture, presenting a mountain of evidence. Financial records showing payments funneled through county accounts, testimony from employees who claimed they were pressured to work on Wecht's private cases during county hours, documents detailing the cadaver exchanges. Witnesses described a man consumed by ambition whose relentless drive had blinded him to the ethical lines he crossed. One former staffer, her voice trembling, recounted how she was tasked with faxing Wecht's private contracts from the coroner's office, knowing it was wrong but fearing his wrath. Another spoke of unclaimed bodies moved under Wecht's orders, their fate sealed not by science but by deals struck in shadow. Wecht's legal team, led by seasoned attorneys, fought back with ferocity. They argued the charges were a gross exaggeration, the work of overzealous prosecutors twisting administrative oversights into a criminal conspiracy. The cadaver allegations, they insisted, were a distortion. Wecht had used unclaimed bodies for educational purposes, a common practice in medical research approved by the county and conducted with respect for the deceased. The use of county resources? A matter of convenience, not theft, born of a man juggling multiple roles in service to justice. They summoned colleagues who testified to Wecht's integrity, his tireless pursuit of truth. This is a witch hunt, one supporter declared outside the courthouse, a disgrace to everything Cyril stands for. As the trial loomed, Pittsburgh became a city divided. Wecht's supporters packed rallies holding signs that read, "Justice for Cyril." His critics, meanwhile, saw the case as a reckoning for a man who had grown too powerful, too untouchable. The courtroom was a crucible, each side wielding evidence like a weapon. Prosecutors presented emails, invoices, and bank statements, each a thread in the tapestry of Wecht's alleged crimes. The defense countered with character witnesses, experts who argued the cadaver exchanges were standard, even noble, in the pursuit of science. The tension was palpable, the stakes enormous. A conviction could end Wecht's career, tarnish his legacy, and send him to prison. An acquittal would be a rebuke to the system, proof that Wecht's enemies had overreached. The trial began in January 2008, 2 years after the indictment, and it was a spectacle. Reporters filled the galleries, their pens scratching furiously as testimony unfolded. Wecht, ever the showman, remained defiant, his sharp wit and commanding presence undimmed. He took the stand, his voice steady, insisting he had done nothing wrong. "My life has been dedicated to truth," he told the jury, his eyes burning with conviction. "I have never betrayed the public's trust." But the prosecution was relentless, hammering at inconsistencies, piling evidence until the weight seemed crushing. The cadaver charge in particular struck a nerve. Jurors winced as prosecutors described bodies traded like commodities, their dignity sacrificed for Wecht gain. Yet, as the weeks dragged on, cracks appeared. Some witnesses faltered under cross-examination, their stories unraveling. Others admitted to personal grudges against Wecht, raising questions of bias. The defense leaned into the political angle, suggesting Buchanan, a Bush appointee, had targeted Wecht for his outspokenness. They pointed to the timing. Wecht's indictment came amid his public criticism of the Iraq War and federal policies. Was it coincidence, they asked, or a calculated strike? The jury, a mix of Pittsburgh locals, listened intently, their faces unreadable. Days turned to weeks, and the courtroom grew heavy with anticipation. When deliberations began, the city held its breath. Hours stretched into days, then weeks. The jury was deadlocked, unable to reach a verdict. Whispers of a mistrial grew louder, and in April 2008, the judge declared it so. The courtroom erupted, supporters cheering, prosecutors grim. Wecht walked free, but the shadow of the charges lingered. Buchanan vowed to retry the case, but the political landscape was shifting. A new administration took office, and in 2008, the Department of Justice quietly dropped the charges. Wecht was exonerated, his career intact, but the toll was evident. His reputation, once unassailable, bore scars. Friends spoke of a man changed, his fire dimmed by the ordeal. The case of Cyril Wecht is a labyrinth of questions. Was he a corrupt official, exploiting his office for profit, as the prosecution claimed? Or was he a victim of political persecution, targeted for his courage to speak truth? The truth, as always, lies in the gray. Wecht resumed his work, his voice still a force in forensic science, but the scandal never fully faded. It left Pittsburgh grappling with its trust in institutions, its faith in heroes. For those who followed the case, it was a reminder of how thin the line between justice and vengeance can be, how easily power can be wielded as a weapon. As the rain falls tonight, Wecht's story lingers, a shadow that refuses to fade, asking us to decide for ourselves where the truth lies. Part 2, Bank of China Embezzlement, United States, January 2006. In the neon glow of Las Vegas, where dreams are wagered and fortunes vanish in a heartbeat, the year 2006 unveiled a scandal that glittered darker than any casino jackpot. This was no tale of luck or chance, but a meticulously crafted heist that stretched from the bustling banks of China to the desert's edge. At its heart were two men, Xu Chaofan and Xu Guojun, former managers of the Bank of China, whose ambition and audacity led them to steal $485 million, 0 cents, laundering it through a web of lies that spanned the globe. With their wives by their side, they lived like kings, believing they'd outrun justice, but the shadows of their past were closing in, and the price of greed would be paid in full. This is the story of the Bank of China embezzlement, a saga of betrayal, deception, and a hunt that refused to end. Xu Chaofan and Xu Guojun were not the kind of men you'd expect to orchestrate one of the largest bank frauds in history. In the late 1990s, they were respected figures in Kaiping, a bustling city in China's Guangdong province. As managers at the Bank of China's local branch, they oversaw millions in transactions, their lives steeped in the quiet power of financial authority. Xiao Fan, the elder of the two, was charming with a quick smile and a mind for numbers that earned him trust. Guo Jun, his deputy, was quieter, methodical, the kind of man who thrived in the details. Together, they were a formidable pair entrusted with the wealth of a nation. But beneath their polished exteriors burned a hunger for wealth, for freedom, for a life beyond the rigid confines of their roles. The seeds of their crime were sown in the economic boom of China's late 1990s. The country was opening to the world, its banks flush with cash, but oversight was lax and ambition was a dangerous spark. Chao Fan and Guo Jun saw opportunity in the chaos, a chance to claim a fortune that wasn't theirs. It began small, almost tentative, a few thousand siphoned here, a forged document there, but greed is a fire that grows, and soon their plan became a masterpiece of deception. They devised a scheme to embezzle hundreds of millions, using the bank's own systems against it. Shell companies, fake loans, and fabricated accounts became their tools. Each transaction a thread in a tapestry of fraud so intricate it went unnoticed for years. By 1998, their operation was in full swing. The men created a network of dummy corporations, funneling money out of the Bank of China under the guise of legitimate business deals. They worked with precision, exploiting loopholes in the bank's auditing process. To outsiders, the Kaiping branch was thriving, its ledgers balanced, its managers exemplary. But beneath the surface, millions were vanishing, wired to offshore accounts in Hong Kong, the Caribbean. Xiao Fan and Guo Jun were careful, never flaunting their wealth in China. They played their roles, dutiful bankers, loyal husbands, while their fortunes grew in secret. Their wives, Deng Ying and Yu Hangwei, were drawn into the scheme, not as bystanders, but as partners, their loyalty bound by love and the promise of a new life. The plan was audacious, but it wasn't enough to simply steal the money. To keep it, they needed to disappear. In 2001, as whispers of irregularities began to surface at the bank, the men made their move. They fled China, leaving behind their old lives and taking their wives with them. Their destination was the United States, a land of opportunity where wealth could buy anonymity. They landed in Las Vegas, the city of reinvention, where the bright lights masked the shadows of their past. Under false identities, they became new men, wealthy entrepreneurs, untouchable by the laws they'd left behind. Chao Fan posed as a successful businessman, Guju his quiet partner. Their wives adapted, blending into the American dream with ease. Mansions, luxury cars, and private schools for their children became their reality. Funded by the stolen million, Las Vegas was the perfect stage for their deception. The city's casinos offered a way to launder their fortune, turning dirty money into clean winnings. They didn't gamble much. Losing was never the goal. Instead, they passed funds through slot machines and high-stakes tables, collecting payouts that looked legitimate. Shell companies in Nevada and California masked their transactions, while offshore accounts in places like the Cayman Islands kept their wealth out of reach. They were meticulous. Each move calculated to stay one step ahead of suspicion. To neighbors, they were just another wealthy family, their accents a curiosity, their lives a testament to the American promise. But the truth was a ticking bomb, and time was running out. Back in China, the Bank of China was unraveling the fraud. Routine audits in 2001 revealed discrepancies at the Kaiping branch, millions missing, accounts that didn't add up. Investigators dug deeper, uncovering a trail of forged documents and phantom loans. The scale of the theft was staggering. $485 million, 0 cents. A fortune that dwarfed most bank heists in history. The Chinese government was furious, its reputation on the line. Chao Fan and Guo Jun were named as the masterminds, their faces plastered across wanted lists. But they were gone, banished into the wind, leaving behind a nation demanding justice. China's authorities reached out to the world, enlisting Interpol and the FBI in a global manhunt. The chase was on, and Las Vegas was about to become a battleground. The FBI's Las Vegas field office took the lead, their agents diving into a case that spanned continents. Tracking the money was like chasing a ghost. Every lead led to another shell company, another dead end, but the agents were relentless, piecing together the puzzle with forensic accountants and international partners. They traced wire transfers from Hong Kong to Nevada, uncovering accounts linked to Chao Fan and Guo Jun's false identity. Surveillance teams watched their lavish homes, noting their routines, their habits. The men were careful, but not careful enough. A slip here, a careless transaction there, and the net began to tighten. The wives, too, were under scrutiny, their roles in the laundering scheme coming into focus. By 2004, the FBI had enough to move. They uncovered evidence that Chai Fan and Guo Jun had used Las Vegas casinos to clean their money. Their minimal gambling a facade for massive payouts. Financial records showed millions flowing through their shell companies, each transaction a breadcrumb leading back to Kaiping. The agents also found something else. The men's lives were unraveling. The pressure of living as fugitives, the fear of discovery, was taking its toll. Chao Fan, once the charming leader, grew paranoid, his temper flaring. Guo Jun, the quiet one, withdrew, haunted by the life they left behind. Their wives, too, felt the strain, their loyalty tested by the constant shadow of capture. The breakthrough came in 2005 when a tip from a Hong Kong informant confirmed the men's identities. The FBI moved swiftly, coordinating with Chinese authorities to build an airtight case. On a quiet morning in January 2006, federal agents descended on their Las Vegas homes. Chao Fan was arrested at his mansion, his face a mask of defiance as handcuffs clicked shut. Guo Jun surrendered without a fight, his eyes hollow, as if he'd known this day would come. Their wives, Deng Ying and Yu Hongwei, were also taken into custody, their roles as co-conspirators undeniable. The city that had sheltered their secrets now watched as their empire crumbled. The indictment was a bombshell: conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The charges painted a picture of a decade-long scheme, a betrayal of trust that had shaken one of China's largest banks. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, wire transfers, casino surveillance footage, even emails between the conspirators. Prosecutors described a sophisticated criminal enterprise, one that exploited global financial systems with chilling precision. Chao Fan and Guo Jun faced the brunt of the charges, their leadership roles clear. The wives, while complicit, were portrayed as followers, their sentences likely to be lighter. The courtroom was packed, reporters scribbling furiously as the case unfolded, a tale of greed that captivated the world. The trial, held in Las Vegas's federal courthouse, was a spectacle. Prosecutors laid out their case with surgical precision, presenting financial records that traced the stolen millions from Kaiping to Nevada. Witnesses, including former bank employees from China, testified to the men's meticulous planning, their forged documents a work of art. Casino managers described their odd gambling habits: large deposits, minimal play, quick withdrawals. The defense fought back, arguing the men were scapegoats, blamed for systemic failures in China's banking oversight. They claimed the money was mismanaged, not stolen, a desperate bid to downplay the crime. But the jury wasn't swayed. The evidence was a tidal wave, each document a nail in the coffin. Che often took the stand, his charm faded but his defiance intact. He spoke of pressure, of a system that pushed him to bend rules, but his words rang hollow. Guojun, by contrast, was silent, his testimony brief, his guilt a quiet admission. The wives, tearful, pleaded for leniency, claiming they acted out of love, not greed. The jury deliberated for days, the weight of the case heavy. When the verdict came, it was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Xiao Fan and Guojun were sentenced to over 20 years each, their dreams of freedom reduced to a cell. Deng Ying and Yu Hongwei received lesser sentences, their roles secondary but undeniable. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with the finality of justice. The Bank of China embezzlement case was more than a crime, it was a warning. It exposed the vulnerabilities of global finance, the ease with which millions could vanish in a digital age. Spurred reforms in China's banking oversight, tightened anti-money laundering laws, and strengthened international cooperation. For Las Vegas, it was a reminder that even its bright lights couldn't hide the shadows of crime. The case lingered in the public's mind, a story of ambition that soared too high, of men who thought they could outrun their past. Xiao Fan and Guojun, once kings of their own making, now faced decades behind bars, their fortunes dust, their names synonymous with betrayal. As the rain falls tonight, the story of the Bank of China heist whispers through the darkness, a tale of greed that spanned oceans and ended in chains. It asks us to consider the cost of ambition, the fragility of trust, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The men who stole a fortune thought they'd won, but the shadows of their past were patient, waiting to claim what was owed. In the end, no amount of money could buy their freedom. No lie could outrun the truth. Close your eyes, let the storm carry their story away, and wonder, what would you risk for a life that wasn't yours? Part 3, Cindy Neo, Tragedy. Singapore, January 2006. In the humid dusk of October 2004, the quiet neighborhood of Teluk Blangah in Singapore hummed with the rhythm of everyday life. Children played in the courtyards of high-rise flats, their laughter echoing through the tropical air. Among them was Cindy Neo, a 4-year-old girl with bright eyes and a smile that could melt hearts. Her world was simple. Her parents, her toys, the safety of home. But on October 26th, that world shattered in a way that would scar Singapore forever. A woman driven by obsession and haunted by her own fractured mind would tear Cindy from her family, leaving a nation to grapple with grief, rage, and a question that lingers still. How do you judge a mind that cannot judge itself? This is the story of the Cindy Neo tragedy, a tale of innocence lost, madness unchained, and a city forced to confront its own awe. Cindy Neo was a child of light in a city that prided itself on order. Singapore, with its gleaming skyscrapers and strict laws, was a place where crime was rare, where safety was a promise. Cindy's parents, Neo K. Siang and his wife, were ordinary people working hard to give their daughter a future. Their flat in Teluk Blangah was modest, but filled with love, a sanctuary where Cindy's giggles were the soundtrack of their days. She was their only child, their treasure, a girl who loved her dolls and her father's stories. To neighbors, she was a familiar sight, skipping through the corridors, her tiny voice calling out in delight. No one could have imagined the darkness was watching, waiting to steal her away. The darkness took the form of Constance Chi, a 36-year-old woman whose life had once sparkled with promise. Chi was no stranger to glamour. A former Singapore Airlines stewardess, she had traveled the world, her poise and beauty turning heads. But beneath the polished exterior, her mind was unraveling. By 2004, Chi was a shadow of her former self, her mental health crumbling under the weight of schizophrenia. Diagnosed years earlier, she struggled with delusions, her thoughts a tangled web of paranoia and fixation. Her life had spiraled, her career lost, her relationships fractured, her grip on reality slipping. And in that chaos, one obsession took root. Neo K. Siang, Cindy's father. Chi and Neo had known each other years before, their connection brief but intense. To Chi, it was more than a fleeting romance. It was a lifeline, a story she rewrote in her mind until it became truth. She believed Neo was hers, that their bond was eternal despite his marriage and his life with Cindy and her mother. Her delusions grew, fed by rejection and isolation. She began to stalk Neo, her presence a ghost in his life. The letters, calls, unannounced visits, each was a step closer to the edge. Neo, unaware of the depth of her illness, tried to distance himself, but Chi's mind was a storm and Cindy became its unwitting target. On that fateful October evening, the air was thick with the promise of rain. Cindy played outside her flat, her mother nearby, the rhythm of Tela Planga unchanged. Chi was watching, her mind a cauldron of distorted purpose. She saw Cindy not as a child, but as a piece in her warped narrative, a way to reclaim Neo or punish him for his perceived betrayal. What happened next was swift and unthinkable. As Cindy's mother turned away for a moment, she approached, her voice soft, coaxing. To Cindy, she was just another adult, her intentions hidden behind a smile. In an instant, Chi took the girl's hand and led her away, vanishing into the maze of high-rising corridors. The abduction was silent, unnoticed, a theft of innocence in broad daylight. Cindy's mother realized her daughter was gone within minutes, but those minutes were an eternity. Panic seized her, her cries echoing through the neighborhood. Neighbors joined the search, their footsteps pounding the concrete, their voices calling Cindy's name. Police were summoned, their sirens slicing through the evening calm. Telak Blenga, a place of routine, was now a crime scene, its residents gripped by fear. No one knew where Cindy was, but the truth was more horrific than they could imagine. She had taken her to a nearby high-rise, and her intentions unclear even to herself. In her fractured mind, this was not a crime, but a necessity. A step in a story only she understood. What happened in that high-rise is a wound Singapore still carries. Chi, standing on a balcony 12 stories above the city, held Cindy in her arms. The girl, confused and frightened, could not comprehend the danger. Below, the world went on, unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Then, in a moment that defies reason, Chi acted. She lifted Cindy over the railing and let go. The child fell, her tiny body plummeting through the night, striking the ground with a force that ended her life instantly. Cindy Neo, 4 years old, was gone, her laughter silenced forever. She stood frozen, her mind a void, as the reality of her act began to pierce the fog of her delusions. The discovery of Cindy's body sent shockwaves through Telo Planga. A passerby found her crumpled and lifeless and screamed for help. Police swarmed the scene, their faces grim as they cordoned off the area. Paramedics arrived, but there was nothing to be done. Cindy's parents were brought to the site, their grief a raw, shattering force. Neo K. Xiong collapsed, his cries echoing through the night while his wife clung to him, her world reduced to ash. But the community washed in horror, their safe haven violated by an act so unthinkable it defied comprehension. Singapore, a nation unaccustomed to such violence, was stunned, its people demanding answers. The police moved quickly. Witnesses reported seeing a woman with Cindy before she vanished, and descriptions led to Chi. She was found hours later, wandering nearby, her demeanor erratic, her words incoherent. Officers arrested her, their questions met with a jumble of delusions and denials. Chi spoke of Neo, of love, of a reality that existed only in her mind. It was clear she was not well, but the weight of her actions was undeniable. Cindy was dead and she was responsible. The case gripped Singapore, its details splashed across newspapers and television screens. A child had been stolen. Her life ended in a moment of madness and the nation wanted justice. She was charged with murder, a crime that carried the death penalty in Singapore's strict legal system. But as investigators dug deeper, the complexity of the case emerged. Chi's medical records revealed a long history of schizophrenia, her condition documented by doctors who had warned of her instability. She had been in and out of treatment, her medications sporadic, her family struggling to manage her illness. Psychiatrists evaluated her, their reports painting a picture of a woman lost in delusions, her actions driven by a mind that could not distinguish reality from fantasy. The question was no longer just about guilt, but about responsibility. Could a woman so broken be held to the same standard as a calculating killer? The trial began in early 2006, and it was a crucible for Singapore's soul. The courtroom was packed, reporters capturing every word, the public hanging on each development. Prosecutors presented a harrowing case, detailing Cindy's abduction and death with clinical precision. Witnesses recounted the moments before the tragedy, their voices breaking as they described Cindy's innocence. Neo K. Seong took the stand, his grief raw, his words a plea for his daughter's memory. He spoke of Che's obsession, her relentless pursuit, but also of his ignorance of her illness, a regret that haunted him. The prosecution argued that Che's actions, delusional or not, had ended a life. Injustice demanded accountability. Chi's defense team fought a different battle. They did not deny her actions, but pleaded for understanding. Psychiatrists testified to her schizophrenia, describing how her delusions had consumed her, making her believe her actions were justified. They argued that Chi lacked the intent required for murder, her mind too fractured to form malice. The defense called for a charge of culpable homicide, a lesser offense that acknowledged her mental state. It was a risky strategy in a nation where mental illness was often stigmatized, where justice was swift and unforgiving. Yet the evidence was compelling. Chi's history, her erratic behavior, her lack of remorse, not out of cruelty but out of disconnection. Courtroom was a battleground of emotions. Cindy's family sat in silent agony, their loss a constant presence. Chi, medicated and subdued, stared blankly, her thoughts a mystery. The public was divided. Some demanded death, seeing only the horror of Cindy's fate. Others saw a tragedy of untreated illness, a failure of systems meant to protect. Singapore's media fueled the debate, editorials questioning how a woman so ill could slip through the cracks, how a child could pay the price. The trial stretched on, each day a reminder of the fragility of life, the complexity of justice. And when the verdict came in April 2006, it was a moment of reckoning. The judge, his voice measured, acknowledged the tragedy's weight. Chi was found guilty of culpable homicide, not murder. Her mental state, a mitigating factor. She was sentenced to 13 years, 10 for homicide, 3 for abduction, a term that sparked outrage and relief in equal measure. Cindy's family wept, feeling the sentence too light for their loss. Others saw it as a step toward compassion, a recognition that she was not a monster, but a woman broken by her own mind. The judge's words lingered. This is a tragedy for all involved. A child lost, a family shattered, a mind lost to illness. The Cindy Neo tragedy left Singapore changed. It forced the nation to confront mental health, a topic long shrouded in silence. Advocates called for better treatment, early intervention, and awareness, pointing to Chi's untreated illness as a warning. The case also sparked debates on justice, how to balance punishment with understanding, how to honor a victim's memory while addressing a perpetrator's humanity. Get to the mirror before they became a place of mourning, Cindy's absence a ghost in its corridors. Her parents, forever altered, retreated from public view, their grief a private wound. Chi served her sentence in Changi prison, her life a quiet routine of medication and isolation. Reports suggested she showed little awareness of her crime, her mind still adrift. For Singapore, the case was a mirror, reflecting its strengths and flaws. It was a nation that prided itself on safety, yet one child had slipped through its embrace. It was a society that valued justice, yet struggled with the gray of mental illness. The rain that fell on Telok Blangah in the years that followed seemed to carry Cindy's name, a reminder of a life too brief, a loss too deep. As the storm whispers tonight, the story of Cindy Neal lingers in the shadows, a tale of innocence stolen and a nation's search for answers. It asks us to consider the boundaries of blame, the weight of a broken mind, and the cost of a moment's madness. Cindy's laughter is silent now, but her memory endures. A call to protect the vulnerable, to see the unseen. Close your eyes, let the rain carry your story away, and wonder, how do we heal a wound that never closes it? Part 4. Live store scandal, Japan, January 2006. In the frenetic pulse of Tokyo, where skyscrapers pierce the sky and innovation drives the future, January 2006 brought a scandal that would jolt Japan to its core. At its center was Takafumi Hori, a brash, young entrepreneur whose meteoric rise had made him a symbol of a new Japan. Bold, unapologetic, and unbound by tradition. His company, Live Door, was a titan of the internet age, a beacon of possibility in a nation steeped in corporate rigidity. But beneath the glitter of success lay a web of deception, woven with ambition so fierce it would bring markets crashing, lives unraveling, and a nation questioning the price of progress. This is the story of the Live Door scandal, a tale of hubris, betrayal, and a fall that echoed far beyond Tokyo's neon lights. Takafumi Hori was no ordinary businessman. Born in 1972 in Fukuoka, he was a child of Japan's post-war boom, raised in a world where tradition clashed with the promise of change. From an early age, Hori was different. Restless, defiant, a dreamer who saw opportunity where others saw rules. He dropped out of the prestigious University of Tokyo, a move that shocked his peers, to chase a vision of his own. In 1995, at just 22, he founded Livin' on the Edge, a small internet startup that would evolve into Lived Door. His timing was perfect. Japan was awakening to the digital age, and Hori was its prodigy, a self-styled rebel who rejected the gray suits and rigid hierarchies of corporate Japan. By the early 2000s, Livedoor was a juggernaut. What began as a web design firm had grown into a sprawling empire, offering everything from internet services to financial products. Hori, with his casual hoodies and outspoken demeanor, was a media darling, dubbed Horiyamon for his resemblance to a popular cartoon character. He was Japan's answer to Silicon Valley's tech moguls, a symbol of a generation hungry for change. He acquired companies with dizzying speed, from media firms to accounting software giants, each move bolder than the last. His wealth soared, his influence undeniable. He hobnobbed with politicians, challenged Japan's old guard, and even ran for parliament, promising to shake up a system he called stagnant. To his admirers, he was a visionary. To his critics, he was a reckless upstart, playing with fire in a nation that valued stability above all. But Hori's empire was built on sand. By 2004, Livedoor's rapid growth was raising eyebrows. Investors marveled at its soaring stock price, but whispers of irregularities began to surface. How could a company expand so fast, so flawlessly? Behind closed doors, Hori and his inner circle were weaving a dangerous game. They needed Livedoor's stock to keep climbing, not just for profit, but for survival. Acquisitions required cash, and cash required confidence. To maintain the illusion of unstoppable success, Hori turned to tactics that would prove his undoing, tactics that danced on the edge of legality and plunged into the abyss of fraud. The scheme was audacious, a masterpiece of corporate deception. Hori, along with key executives like CFO Ryoji Miyauchi, allegedly manipulated Livedoor's financials to inflate its stock price. They used subsidiaries to create fake revenue, issuing misleading press releases that painted a picture of robust growth. One tactic, known as stock splitting, allowed them to artificially boost share prices by dividing shares into smaller units, creating a frenzy among investors. Another involved off-the-books deals where Livedoor's subsidiaries traded assets in ways that hid losses and fabricated profits. It was a house of cards, each lie propping up the next, and Hori was its architect, betting that no one would look too closely. And for a time it worked. Livedoor's stock soared, its market value rivaling Japan's oldest corporations. Hori was untouchable, his charisma deflecting scrutiny. He bought a baseball team, flirted with media empires, and even eyed Japan's national broadcaster Fuji TV in a hostile takeover bid that stunned the establishment. His defiance of tradition made him a hero to young Japanese who saw in him a future unshackled from the past. But the higher he climbed, the more enemies he made. Japan's corporate elite, threatened by his rise, watched with growing unease. Regulators, too, began to take notice, their suspicions fueled by anonymous tips and market anomalies. The shadows were gathering, and Hori's empire was about to face its reckoning. January 16, 2006, the storm broke. Tokyo prosecutors, backed by Japan's Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission, raided Livedoor's sleek headquarters in Roppongi Hills. The images were jarring. Stern-faced investigators carting away boxes of documents, employees frozen in shock, the glass walls of Hori's empire reflecting a city on edge. The news spread like wildfire. Takafumi Hori was under investigation for securities fraud and accounting irregularities. The Tokyo Stock Exchange reeled, Livedoor's shares plummeting in a sell-off so massive it forced an early trading halt, a rare humiliation for one of the world's largest markets. Japan watched transfixed as the golden boy of its tech revolution faced a fall that seemed unthinkable. Hori was arrested days later on January 23rd along with Miyauchi and other executives. The charges were damning: violation of securities laws, falsification of financial statements, and market manipulation. Prosecutors alleged that Hori had orchestrated a scheme to inflate Livedoor's stock by over $50 million, 0 cents, misleading investors and endangering Japan's financial stability. The evidence was meticulous. Emails, financial records, and witness testimony painting a picture of deliberate deceit. One document, a press release from 2004, claimed Livedoor had earned massive profits from a subsidiary deal, a lie that sent shares soaring. Another showed Hori's approval of transactions designed to hide losses, his signature a mark of guilt. The raid's aftermath was chaos. Livedoor stock became worthless, wiping out billions in market value. Small investors drawn by Hori's charisma lost their savings, their dreams crushed by his betrayal. The Tokyo Stock Exchange, humiliated by the trading halt, faced questions about its oversight. Japan's corporate world, long a bastion of tradition, saw Hori's fall as vindication, proof that rebels could not be trusted. But the scandal's toll went deeper. On January 18, just days after the raid, a Livedoor executive linked to the scheme was found dead, an apparent suicide. His death, shrouded in mystery, added a layer of tragedy to the unfolding drama, a reminder that ambition's cost was not just financial, but human. Hori's trial began in September 2006, and it was a spectacle that gripped Japan. The courtroom was a stage, Hori its reluctant star. Gone was the brash Horeiman, replaced by a man in a suit, his defiance tempered but not extinguished. Prosecutors laid out their case with precision, presenting a mountain of evidence, forged financial statements, incriminating emails, testimony from insiders who claim Hori had driven the fraud with relentless pressure. One witness, a former subordinate, described Hori's obsession with Livedoor's stock price, his orders to do whatever it takes to keep it rising. The prosecution painted Hori as a man consumed by hubris, willing to sacrifice ethics for glory. Hori's defense team fought back, arguing he was a scapegoat for a system resistant to change. They claimed the transactions were legal, misinterpreted by regulators who didn't understand the fast-paced world of tech. Hori, they said, was a visionary, not a criminal. His aggressive tactics, a necessity in a cutthroat market. They pointed to Japan's corporate elite, suggesting the prosecution was a vendetta to crush a man who dared to challenge the status quo. Hori took the stand, his voice steady, insisting he had acted in Lindor's best interests. "I wanted to build something great," he told the court, his eyes scanning the room. "I never meant to harm anyone." But his words, once magnetic, now rang hollow, drowned by the weight of evidence. This trial stretched into 2007, each day a dissection of Livedoor's inner workings. The public was divided. Young Japanese, inspired by Hori's rebellion, saw him as a martyr, a symbol of a nation stifling innovation. Others, especially older generations, viewed him as a cautionary tale, proof that ambition without restraint was dangerous. The media fueled the debate with talk shows and editorials dissecting Hori's legacy. Was he a genius betrayed by his own flaws, or a con man who had played Japan for a fool? The courtroom, packed with reporters and spectators, became a microcosm of a nation wrestling with its identity, tradition versus progress, stability versus risk. When the verdict came on March 16, 2007, it was a moment of reckoning. The judge, his voice grave, found Hori guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, a term that shocked his supporters but satisfied those who saw justice served. Miyayoshi and other executives received lesser sentences, their roles secondary but undeniable. Hori stood motionless as the sentence was read, his face unreadable. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, some cheering, others weeping. Livedoor, once a titan, was a shell, its assets sold, its name synonymous with scandal. Hori's empire, built on dreams and deception, had crumbled to dust. The Livedoor scandal reshaped Japan. It prompted sweeping reforms in corporate governance, with stricter regulations on financial reporting and stock trading. The Tokyo Stock Exchange, stung by its failure, overhauled its oversight, determined to prevent another collapse. Japan's tech industry, briefly a beacon of hope, faced skepticism, its innovators tainted by Hori's shadow. Yet, the scandal's impact went beyond policy. It forced Japan to confront its ambivalence toward change. Hori's rise had inspired a generation, but his fall warned of the dangers of unchecked ambition. He was both hero and villain, a mirror reflecting a nation at a crossroads. Hori served his sentence, released in 2013 after less than 2 years, his charisma undimmed. He returned to the public eye, writing books, launching startups, and preaching the gospel of innovation. To some, he was a phoenix, risen from ashes. To others, he was a reminder of betrayal, his charm a mask for greed. The executive's suicide, the investor's losses, the market's scars. These were wounds that lingered, unspoken but unforgotten. Japan moved on, its tech sector rebounding, but the Livedoor scandal remained a touchstone. A story whispered in boardrooms and classrooms, a warning of what happens when ambition outpaces ethics. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Takafumi Hori echoes through the shadows, a tale of a man who reached for the stars and fell to earth. It asks us to consider the line between vision and deception, the cost of chasing greatness in a world that demands order. Hori's empire is gone, but his legacy endures, a question mark in Japan's heart. Was he a pioneer punished for his boldness, or a fraud who betrayed those who believed in him? Close your eyes, let the storm carry his story away, and wonder, what would you sacrifice to rewrite the rules? Part 5. Andre Chad Perenze, Australia, January 2006. In the warm glow of Adelaide, South Australia, where eucalyptus scents drift through suburban streets and life hums with quiet routine, the year 2006 unveiled a case that would shatter the city's calm. It was a story not of violence in the traditional sense, but of a betrayal so insidious it left lives in ruins. At its center was Andre Chad Perenze, a 35-year-old South African immigrant whose charm masked a deadly secret. Diagnosed with HIV, he chose silence over honesty, engaging in unprotected sex with multiple women, spreading devastation in his wake. His trial would become one of Australia's most polarizing, a clash of science, denial, and justice that forced a nation to confront uncomfortable truths. This is the story of Andre Chad Perenze, a tale of deception, harm, and a courtroom where the line between victim and villain blurred. Andre Chad Perenze arrived in Australia in the early 1990s, a young man seeking a fresh start. Born in South Africa, he carried the weight of a nation grappling with apartheid scars, but his easy smile and athletic build opened doors. Settling in Adelaide, he found work as a laborer. His accent and curiosity in a city known for its laid-back charm. To those who met him, Perenze was charismatic, a man who moved through life with confidence, forming relationships with ease. Women were drawn to him, his warmth and attentiveness a promise of connection. But beneath the surface, Perenze harbored a truth he refused to share. A secret that would turn his charm into a weapon. In 1998, Perenze received a diagnosis that changed everything. He was HIV positive. At the time, HIV was no longer the automatic death sentence it had been in the 1980s thanks to antiretroviral therapies. But it remained a life-altering condition, one that demanded responsibility. Doctors counseled him on safe practices, emphasizing the importance of disclosure to sexual partners. Perenze nodded, his face unreadable, but the weight of the diagnosis seemed to slide off him. He was told to use protection, to inform those he was intimate with, to take steps to prevent transmission. Yet, in the years that followed, he made a choice that would haunt those who trusted him. He chose silence. Between 1998 and 2004, Perenze lived as if his diagnosis didn't exist. He pursued relationships with multiple women, engaging in unprotected sex without revealing his status. To each, he was a lover, a partner, a man who offered affection in a world that often felt cold. Some relationships were fleeting, others deeper, but none were built on truth. His partners, unaware of the risk, placed their trust in him, believing in the intimacy they shared. Among them was a woman known in court as Miss SMC, a single mother who met Perenze in 2003. Their connection was instant, her heart opened by his attentiveness. For months they were intimate, unprotected, her faith in him unshaken, until the day her world collapsed. In 2004, Ms. SMC began to feel unwell. Fatigue, fever, symptoms that wouldn't fade. A doctor's visit led to a test, and the results were a gut punch. She was HIV positive. Devastated, she retraced her steps, her mind racing to understand how this could have happened. Perenze was her only partner during that time, and when she confronted him, his response was chilling. He denied everything, claiming he was healthy, dismissing her diagnosis as a mistake. But Miss SMC's intuition told her otherwise. She contacted authorities, her grief turning to anger, and the truth began to unravel. Perenze, she learned, had known he was HIV positive for years, a fact he'd hidden not just from her, but from others. The police investigation was swift. Detectives interviewed Perenze, who maintained his innocence, his demeanor calm, almost dismissive. But medical records told a different story. His 1998 diagnosis was documented, his counseling sessions noted, his awareness undeniable. Investigators reached out to other women he'd been involved with, and a pattern emerged. At least 3 others had been exposed, their lives upended by fear and testing. While Ms. SMC was the only confirmed case of transmission, the others faced months of uncertainty, their trust shattered. The case grew, each revelation a layer of betrayal. Perenze was arrested in 2004, charged with endangering life and causing grievous bodily harm, crimes that carried heavy penalties in Australia. Adelaide was stunned. The city, known for its quiet streets and close-knit communities, was unaccustomed to such a scandal. HIV transmission cases were rare, and Perenze's actions struck a nerve. The media descended, headlines screaming of a reckless predator who had endangered lives. Public outrage grew, fueled by the intimate nature of the betrayal. Miss SMC, shielding her identity, became a symbol of the victims, her story one of trust violated. Yet, as the case headed to trial, a twist emerged that would make it one of Australia's most controversial. A defense strategy so audacious it defied belief. The trial began in January 2006, and it was a crucible of emotion and ideology. The courtroom was packed, reporters capturing every word, the public divided between anger and curiosity. Prosecutors presented a compelling case built on medical evidence and personal testimony. Miss MC took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute, recounting how Parenzi's silence had stolen her health, her future. He spoke of the physical toll, medication, side effects, a life forever altered, and the emotional weight of knowing her trust had been betrayed. Other women testified, their stories echoing hers, each a thread in a tapestry of deception. Medical experts confirmed Parenzi's diagnosis, his knowledge, and the risks he'd ignored. The prosecution's argument was clear. Parenzi had acted with reckless disregard, his silence a deliberate choice that caused harm. But the defense, led by a team unafraid of controversy, took a path that stunned the court. They didn't just argue Parenzi's intent or downplay his actions, they challenged the very existence of HIV. Drawing on a fringe movement known as AIDS denialism, they claimed the virus was a myth, a construct of medical conspiracies. Their experts, a small group of discredited scientists, testified that HIV didn't cause AIDS, that Mrs. Hemp's illness was unrelated to Parenzi's status. The courtroom gasped. The judge's brow furrowed as the defense wove a narrative of doubt, questioning decades of scientific consensus. Parenzi, they said, couldn't be guilty of transmitting a virus that didn't exist. His actions mere misunderstandings in a world of flawed science. The strategy was a gamble, one that outraged the prosecution and bewildered the public. Medical experts for the state dismantled the denialist claims, presenting reams of data, studies, trials, global evidence that affirmed HIV's reality and Parenzi's role in its spread. They pointed to Ms. MC's diagnosis, genetically linked to Parenzi's strain, a scientific fingerprint of his guilt. The denialist witnesses faltered under cross-examination, their credentials questioned, their theories exposed as pseudoscience. Yet, the defense persisted, knowing the tactic's true purpose: to sow confusion, to give the jury an excuse to doubt. Parenzi sat silently, his face a mask, as the courtroom became a battleground not just of law, but of truth itself. The trial stretched on, each day a clash of narratives. The prosecution leaned on emotion, calling witnesses who spoke of the stigma and fear HIV brought. One woman, spared infection but scarred by betrayal, described the months of waiting for test results, the dread that haunted her dreams. The defense countered with cold skepticism, framing Parenzi as a victim of a system eager to vilify. They suggested his partners shared responsibility, a claim that sparked fury from advocates who saw it as victim blaming. Outside the courtroom, Adelaide buzzed with debate. Some saw Parenzi as a monster, his actions a betrayal of trust. Others, swayed by the defense's rhetoric, wondered if the case was overblown, a rush to judgment in a city eager for a villain. The jury's test was daunting. They faced not just the evidence, but the weight of a nation's expectations. Australia, with its progressive public health policies, had worked hard to destigmatize HIV, to promote education and prevention. Parenzi's case threatened that progress, reviving old fears and prejudices. The denialist defense in particular drew condemnation from health experts who warned of its potential to mislead the public. Activists rallied, demanding justice for Miss MC and others, their voices a reminder of the human cost. The courtroom was a microcosm of a broader struggle: science versus denial, accountability versus deflection, justice versus doubt. When the verdict came in April 2006, it was a moment of clarity. The jury, unmoved by the denialist claims, found Parenzi guilty on all counts. The judge, his voice stern, sentenced him to 15 years in prison, one of Australia's longest sentences for HIV transmission. Parenzi showed no emotion, his fate sealed by the weight of evidence. Mrs. MC, watching from the gallery, wept, her relief tempered by the knowledge that no sentence could undo her pain. The other women, their lives forever changed, found solace in the verdict, a measure of closure in a story of betrayal. Adelaide exhaled, the city's quiet streets reclaiming their calm, but the scars remained. The Parenzi case left a lasting mark on Australia, It spurred calls for stronger public health campaigns emphasizing disclosure and safe practices. It also highlighted the dangers of misinformation, with health officials working to counter the denialist narrative that had briefly gained traction. Legal reforms followed, clarifying the responsibilities of those with communicable diseases, ensuring future cases would have precedent. For Miss SMC and the others, life went on, their resilience a testament to the human spirit. Parenzi, behind bars, became a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with the cost of silence. The case also forced Australia to confront deeper questions. How do you balance personal freedom with public safety? How do you judge intent in a crime where the weapon is invisible? Parenzi's actions were not born of malice, but of denial, a refusal to face his reality. Yet the harm was real, the lives altered, undeniable. The trial exposed the fragility of trust, the power of truth, and the need for systems to protect the vulnerable. Adelaide, a city of light, had faced its shadows, and in doing so, found a path toward healing. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Andre Chad Parenzi whispers through the darkness, a tale of a man whose secret became a weapon in a nation that sought justice amid doubt. It asks us to consider the weight of truth, the cost of denial, and the strength it takes to rebuild. Parenzi's charm is gone, his legacy one of harm, but the voices of those he hurt endure. A call to remember, to learn, to protect. Close your eyes, let the storm carry their story away, and wonder what secrets lie hidden in the hearts we trust. Part 6, Richmond Spree Killings, United States, January 2006. In the crisp dawn of January 2006, Richmond, Virginia stirred under a winter sky, its cobblestone streets and historic homes a testament to a city proud of its past. Families gathered for New Year's celebrations, their laughter filling homes where love and routine held sway. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a darkness was moving, swift and merciless. Two cousins, Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge, were on a path of destruction, their motives a twisted blend of greed and cruelty. Over 7 days, they would claim 7 lives in a spree of violence that shattered Richmond's soul, leaving a community to grapple with grief, fear, and a question that lingers still. What drives men to such evil? This is the story of the Richmond Spree Killings, a tale of horror, loss, and a city's search for justice. Richmond was a city of contrasts, its charm rooted in history, but its streets marked by the struggles of urban life. By 2006, it was striving for renewal, its neighborhoods a mix of revitalized homes and pockets of poverty. The Harvey family, Brian, Catherine, and their daughters Stella and Ruby, lived in Woodland Heights, a quiet enclave where porch lights glowed and neighbors waved. Brian, 49, and Catherine, 39, were beloved, their toy store a community hub. Stella, 9, and Ruby, 4, were bright, their giggles a constant in their cozy home. Across town, the Tuckers, Percy, old Mary, and her daughter Ashley, Baskerville, lived in a modest house, their lives grounded in faith and resilience. These families, strangers to each other, shared a city and a fate neither could foresee. Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge were not strangers to trouble. Gray, 28, was a drifter with a rap sheet, drug charges, theft, a life spiraling downward. Dandridge, 29, his cousin and accomplice, shared his restless energy, their bond forged in a childhood of hardship. Both had recently been released from prison, their freedom a spark for chaos. In late 2005, they reunited in Philadelphia, where a string of robberies marked their descent into crime. But robbery wasn't enough. A hunger for power, for thrill, drove them to darker acts. By December, they were on the move, their path leading south to Richmond, a city they saw as ripe for their brand of terror. Their spree began quietly, a series of burglaries in Virginia's suburbs. Homes were ransacked, valuables stolen, but no one was hurt. The cousins were emboldened, their confidence growing with each success. They worked as a team. Gray, the volatile leader, his temper a fuse waiting to ignite. Dandridge, the planner, his calm a mask for his own cruelty. They carried knives, duct tape, and a .357 Magnum, tools for control and destruction. Their motives were murky, money was a goal, but the violence they inflicted went beyond necessity, hinting at something deeper, something monstrous. Richmond, unaware, was about to become their hunting ground. On New Year's Day, January 1, 2006, the Harvey family was at home, their basement a hub of warmth as friends gathered for a party. The day was ordinary. Music, laughter, the promise of a new year. Around midday, Gray and Dandridge, cruising the neighborhood, spotted the Harveys' open front door. a sign of trust in a friendly community. To them, it was an invitation. They entered, their weapons hidden, their intent cloaked in casual menace. What happened next was a nightmare. Brian, Catherine, Stella, and Ruby were bound with duct tape, their pleas ignored. Gray and Dandridge ransacked the house, stealing cash and jewelry, but robbery was only the beginning. The cousins' cruelty escalated. They beat the family, their blows relentless, driven by a rage that defied reason. Knives flashed, cutting throats, ending lives with brutal efficiency. Brian, Catherine, Stella, and Ruby were left lifeless, their bodies sprawled in the basement. Before fleeing, Gray and Dandridge set the house ablaze, hoping fire would erase their crimes. Smoke rose, neighbors called 911, and firefighters arrived to a scene of horror. The Harveys were gone, their home a smoldering ruin, their deaths a wound that would scar Richmond forever. The city reeled, its residents locking doors, their sense of safety shattered. The police response was immediate, detectives combing the wreckage for clues. The fire had destroyed much, but evidence remained. Duct tape, bloodstains, signs of a struggle. Autopsies revealed the grim truth. The Harveys had been bound, beaten, and slashed, their deaths deliberate, sadistic. Investigators found no immediate suspects, but the brutality suggested more than a random robbery. Richmond was on edge, the media amplifying fears of a killer loose in the city. Candlelight vigils honored the Harveys, their faces, Brian's kind eyes, Catherine's warm smile, Stella and Ruby's innocence etched in the city's heart. Yet, even as the community mourned, Gray and Dandridge were not done. 5 days later, on January 6th, the cousins struck again. Their target was the Tucker family, Percy, 55, Mary, 46, and Ashley Baskerville, 21, Mary's daughter from a previous relationship. The Tuckers lived in a working-class neighborhood, their home a place of faith and resilience. Ashley, vibrant and outgoing, was known to Dandridge, a connection from earlier encounters. He had unwittingly crossed paths with the cousins, her trust a fatal misstep. That evening, Gray and Dandridge arrived at the Tucker home, their presence disarming to Ashley, who let them in. What followed was a repeat of the Harveys' fate, but with a cruelty that deepened the horror. The Tuckers were bound, their home ransacked for meager valuables, a TV, some cash. Gray and Dandridge didn't stop there. They beat Percy L., Mary, and Ashley, their violence unrestrained. Knives were drawn, throats cut, lives extinguished in a frenzy of blood. Ashley in particular suffered, her connection to Dandridge making her death a personal betrayal. The cousins fled, leaving the bodies behind, their confidence unshaken. They were unaware, slept through the night, but morning brought discovery. A friend, checking on the family, found the scene and screamed for help. Police arrived, their faces grim, recognizing the signature of the Harvey killings. Duct tape, knife wounds, a home violated. Richmond was now a city under siege. 2 families, 7 lives lost in a week. The police connected the crimes, the similarities unmistakable. Detectives worked around the clock, chasing leads, analyzing evidence. A break came when a tip led to Ashley Baskerville's car, spotted in Philadelphia, far from Richmond. Surveillance footage and witness accounts pointed to Gray and Dandridge, their faces captured on grainy cameras. The cousins, unaware of the net closing, continued their spree in Philadelphia, robbing and assaulting, but their time was running out. On January 7th, Philadelphia police, acting on a warrant, arrested them after a brief chase, their weapons and stolen goods linking them to Richmond's horrors. Investigation unraveled the cousins' path of destruction. Forensic evidence, DNA, fingerprints, blood on their clothes, tied them to both crime scenes. The .357 Magnum, recovered in Philadelphia, matched casings found near the Tucker home. Witnesses described their movements, their casual brutality, chilling in its nonchalance. Gray and Dandridge, facing overwhelming evidence, turned on each other. Dandridge, hoping for leniency, confessed, detailing their crimes with a detachment that stunned detectives. Gray, defiant, admitted his role but minimized it, blaming Dandridge for the worst. Their confessions, though self-serving, sealed their fate, painting a picture of men who killed not just for gain but for pleasure. The trials were separate, each a reckoning for Richmond. Gray's began in 2006, the courtroom packed with grieving families and a city demanding justice. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, crime scene photos, forensic reports, Dandridge's testimony. The Harveys and Tuckers' loved ones took the stand, their voices breaking as they spoke of lives stolen. Brian's sister described his generosity, Catherine's friend her warmth, Stella and Ruby's teacher their promise. Percy Yell's brother spoke of his faith, Mary's cousin her strength, Ashley's friend her vibrancy. The jury, visibly moved, heard Gray's confession, his words cold, his remorse absent. The defense argued his troubled past, abuse, addiction, but it rang hollow against the brutality. Gray was convicted on all counts: capital murder, robbery, arson. The sentencing phase was wrenching, the death penalty on the table. Prosecutors called it justice for 7 lives. The defense pleaded for mercy, citing Gray's humanity. The jury, after hours of deliberation, chose death, a decision that divided Richmond. Some saw it as closure, others as a continuation of violence. Gray, stoic, was sent to death row, his fate sealed. Dondrage's trial followed, his role secondary but undeniable. He too was convicted, but his cooperation spared him death. He received life without parole, a sentence that left some feeling justice was incomplete. Gray's execution came in 2017 after years of appeals. He was 39, his final words a mumbled apology, too late for those he'd harmed. Dandridge remains in prison, his life a footnote to Gray's infamy. Richmond forever changed, rebuilt slowly. The Harveys and Tucker's homes became memorials, their stories told in vigils and scholarships. The city tightened parole oversight, questioning how men like Gray and Dandridge slipped through. Community programs grew, aiming to prevent the despair that breeds such evil. Yet the scars linger, a reminder of a week when darkness walked Richmond's streets. The Richmond spree killings forced a city to confront its vulnerabilities. It asked why men like Gray and Dandridge turned to such cruelty, what systems failed to stop them, and how a community heals from such loss. The Harveys and Tuckers were not just victims, but symbols of resilience. Their lives a call to cherish what matters. The case exposed the fragility of safety, the randomness of evil, and the strength it takes to carry on. Richmond, a city of history, added a new chapter, one written in grief, but also in hope. As the rain falls tonight, the story of the Richmond spree killings whispers through the shadows, a tale of lives stolen in a city that refused to break. It asks us to consider the roots of evil, the power of community, and the weight of justice. Gray and Dandridge are gone, their names synonymous with horror, but the Harveys and Tuckers endure, their light a beacon in the darkness. Close your eyes, let the storm carry their story away, and wonder, how do we find peace when the past is written in blood? Part 7, Rachel and Lillian Entwistle, United States, January 2006. In the serene chill of January 2006, Hopkinton, Massachusetts, lay nestled in a cocoon of suburban calm. This was a town of white picket fences, where families built dreams and neighbors shared smiles. At the heart of this idyllic world were Rachel Entwistle, 27, and her 9-month-old daughter, Lillian, their lives a portrait of love and promise. Rachel, with her warm laugh and kind eyes, was a devoted mother and wife, her world revolving around her baby girl. Lillian, with her chubby cheeks and curious gaze, was the light of their home, but behind the facade of their perfect life, a darkness was brewing, one that would shatter Hopkinton's peace and leave a nation questioning how well we truly know those we love. This is the story of Rachel and Lillian Entwistle, a tale of trust betrayed, secrets unveiled, and a town forever marked by loss. Rachel Entwistle was a woman who seemed to have it all. Born in Massachusetts, she was a teacher by trade, her gentle demeanor winning hearts in classrooms and beyond. She met Neil Entwistle, a charming British man, while studying abroad in England. Neil, with his polished accent and boyish grin, swept her off her feet. They married in 2003, their wedding a celebration of cross-continental love. By 2005, they had welcomed Lillian, a bundle of joy, who completed their family. The couple moved to Hopkinton, renting a spacious home on Cubs Path, a quiet street where children played and life felt safe. To neighbors, they were the picture of happiness, a young family starting anew, their future bright. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Neil, 27, was not the man he appeared to be. He presented himself as a successful IT consultant, but his career was a house of cards. His business ventures were failing, debts piling up, his promises of wealth unraveling. He hid his struggles from Rachel, maintaining a facade of stability. Worse, he was living a double life, entangled in online scams and infidelity. He frequented adult websites seeking affairs, his loyalty to Rachel eroding with each secret. Financial ruin loomed, and Neil's desperation grew, a pressure cooker of shame and fear. Rachel, unaware, poured her heart into Lillian, her love for her daughter, a shield against a storm she didn't see coming. On January 20th, 2006, that storm broke with devastating force. Rachel and Lillian were found dead in their Hopkinton home, their bodies tucked beneath blankets in the master bedroom. The discovery came after friends concerned by Rachel's silence alerted police. Officers entered the house expecting a welfare check, but found a scene that chilled them to the core. Rachel had been shot in the head, Lillian in the chest. The .22 caliber bullets precise and lethal. The room was eerily calm, no signs of struggle, the blankets suggesting a tender, almost ritualistic act. A revolver taken from Rachel's stepfather's collection lay nearby, its presence a silent accusation. Hopkinton, a town unaccustomed to violence, was plunged into shock. Its residents locking doors, their trust shattered. The investigation began with urgency, detectives combing the scene for answers. Initially, the deaths were considered a possible murder-suicide, Rachel, perhaps overwhelmed, taking her life and Lillian's. But the theory didn't hold. Rachel's life was full, her love for Lillian boundless, her mental health stable. The focus shifted to Neil, the absent husband. He was nowhere to be found, his car gone, his phone silent. Neighbors reported seeing him leave the morning after the murders, his demeanor calm, almost detached. When police learned he'd boarded a flight to London that day, alarm bells rang. Why would a grieving husband flee without reporting his family's deaths? The answer they feared lay in the shadows of his secrets. Neil's flight to England was a desperate bid to escape, but it only tightened the net. British police, alerted by their American counterparts, tracked him to his parents' home in Worksop. On February 9, 2006, he was arrested, his composure crumbling as he faced extradition. Back in Massachusetts, investigators were piecing together a chilling picture. Forensic evidence pointed to Neil as the killer. His fingerprints were on the revolver, gunshot residue on his clothes. The gun traced to Rachel's stepfather had been returned to its case after the murders, suggesting premeditation. Neil's laptop revealed damning searches: how to kill with a gun, how to stage a suicide. Each click a step toward tragedy. Financial records exposed his debts, his scams, his lies. The motive was emerging: a man trapped by failure, choosing murder over exposure. Hopkinton reeled as the truth unfolded. The end whistles had seemed perfect, their home a haven. Now it was a crime scene, its walls holding secrets no one could have imagined. Rachel's family, devastated, struggled to comprehend Neil's betrayal. Her stepfather, whose gun was used, bore the weight of unintended complicity, his grief compounded by guilt. Lillian's tiny life, barely begun, became a symbol of innocence lost, her memory a wound in the community's heart. Vigils filled Hopkinton streets, candles flickering against the winter cold as residents mourned and questioned how such darkness could hide in plain sight. Neil's extradition brought him back to Massachusetts, where he faced charges of first-degree murder, illegal firearms possession, and evidence tampering. His arraignment was a media frenzy, cameras capturing his hollow eyes, his once charming facade gone. Prosecutors built a meticulous case, weaving forensic evidence with Neil's unraveling life. They argued he killed Rachel and Lillian to escape his failures, believing their deaths would free him from debt and shame. The revolver, taken during a visit to Rachel's family, was his weapon of choice, its use a betrayal of trust. The blankets, they said, were his attempt to stage remorse, a final lie to mask his guilt. The flight to England was not grief, but cowardice, a man running from the truth. Now, the trial began in June 2008, and it was a crucible for Hopkinton. The courtroom was packed, reporters scribbling, Rachel's family a silent presence, their pain palpable. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: the gun, the residue, the laptop searches, each a nail in Neil's coffin. Witnesses painted a picture of a man living a lie. A former colleague described his failed ventures, his boasts of wealth, a facade. Rachel's friends spoke of her devotion, her blindness to Neil's deceit. The most damning testimony came from forensic experts who linked the bullets to the revolver, the residue to Neil's hands. The scene, they said, was no suicide. Rachel and Lillian were shot as they lay in bed, trusting the man who ended their lives. Neil's defense team fought a losing battle. They argued the evidence was circumstantial, the residue inconclusive, the searches ambiguous. They suggested Rachel's death was a suicide, driven by postpartum struggles and Lillian's an accident in her despair. The claim sparked outrage, clashing with Rachel's documented joy as a mother. The defense called few witnesses, their case thin against the prosecution's onslaught. Neil wiped to stay silent, sat impassively, his lack of emotion a stark contrast to the courtroom's grief. The jury, a mix of Hopkinton locals, listened intently, their faces etched with the weight of their task. The trial's emotional peak came when Rachel's mother took the stand. Her voice broke as she described her daughter's love for Lillian, her dreams for their future. She spoke of Neil, once welcomed as family, now a stranger, whose betrayal cut deeper than any knife. "He took everything," she whispered, her words a dagger to the heart. The courtroom wept, the jury visibly moved. The prosecution's closing argument was a call for justice, not just for Rachel and Lillian, but for a community betrayed. Neil Entwistle chose murder over truth, the lead prosecutor said, his voice steady. He killed the ones who loved him most, then ran from the consequences. The deliberations were brief, the evidence overwhelming. On June 25, 2008, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. Neil showed no reaction, his eyes fixed on nothing as the courtroom exhaled. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, a term that ensured he would never walk free. Rachel's family embraced, their relief tempered by loss. Hopkinton, watching from afar, felt a measure of closure, but the wound remained. Neil was sent to a maximum security prison, his name a byword for betrayal, his story a cautionary tale of hidden darkness. The Entwistle case left Hopkinton forever changed. It was a town that prided itself on community, yet one family had suffered in silence. Vigils continued, memorials honoring Rachel and Lillian springing up, a park bench, a scholarship, a tree planted in their names. The case sparked discussions on domestic deception, on the signs missed, the trust misplaced. Rachel's family, particularly her parents, became advocates, sharing her story to raise awareness of hidden struggles. The revolver's owner, Rachel's stepfather, grappled with guilt, his trust in Neil a wound that never healed. The community rallied, but the innocence of Cub's path was gone, replaced by a wary vigilance. Nationally, the case captivated true crime audiences, its elements, love, betrayal, a transatlantic manhunt, fueling documentaries and books. It raised questions about the pressures of masculinity, the shame of failure, and the lengths to which some go to hide their truths. Neil's double life, his online escapades, and his financial ruin were dissected, each detail a warning of how facades can mask danger. For Hopkinton, the case was not just a story but a lived trauma, its quiet streets forever shadowed by the memory of January 20. Rachel and Lillian became symbols, their lives a call to cherish those we hold dear, to see beyond the surface. The legal aftermath saw appeals, each denied, Neil's fate sealed by the strength of the evidence. In prison, he remains a figure of quiet infamy, his charm useless behind bars. Some speculate on his motives, wondering if shame alone drove him to such extremes, or if a deeper darkness lay within. Psychologists point to narcissism, a need for control, but no explanation fully captures the horror. Rachel's love, Lillian's innocence, these were truths Neil could not face, and so he destroyed them. Hopkinton, resilient, rebuilt, but the echoes of that winter linger, a reminder of how fragile trust can be. Excessive fire, like the case, also prompted reflection on justice. Neil's life sentence was seen as fitting, yet some question whether understanding his motives could prevent future tragedies. Domestic violence advocates noted the hidden signs, Neil's control, his secrecy as red flags often missed. The revolver, taken from a trusted family member, sparked debates on gun access, on the ease with which tools of destruction can fall into the wrong hands. Hopkinton's police, praised for their swift response, became a model for small-town investigations. Their collaboration with British authorities, a testament to global justice. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Rachel and Lillian Entwistle whispers through the shadows, a tale of love betrayed in a town that lost its innocence. It asks us to consider the masks we wear, the secrets we keep, and the cost of failing those who trust us. Rachel's laughter, Lillian's tiny hands, these are gone, but their memory endures, a light in Hopkinton's heart. Neil Entwistle, once a husband and father, is now a shadow, his name a warning of what lies beneath the surface. Close your eyes, let the storm carry their story away, and wonder, how well do we truly know the ones we love? Part 8, United States versus Karen Fletcher, United States, February 2006. In the gray chill of February 2006, Donora, Pennsylvania, lay shrouded in the quiet of a fading industrial town. Its streets, once vibrant with steel and ambition, now whispered of better days, their silence broken only by the hum of daily life. In a modest home on the town's edge lived Karen Fletcher, a 56-year-old recluse whose world was one of shadows and secrets. To her neighbors, she was a ghost, rarely seen, her life a mystery behind closed doors. But Karen was no ordinary woman. Through her website, Red Rose Stories, she spun tales so dark they would ignite a firestorm, drawing the gaze of federal prosecutors and thrusting her into a battle that would test the boundaries of free speech, morality, and justice. This is the story of United States vs. Karen Fletcher, a tale of hidden pain, forbidden words, and a nation forced to confront the limits of its freedoms. Karen Fletcher was a woman shaped by trauma. Born in 1949, her childhood was a landscape of abuse, its scars etched deep into her psyche. She spoke little of those years, but those close to her knew the weight she carried. Memories of violence, of powerlessness that never faded. As an adult, she retreated from the world, her agoraphobia and post-traumatic stress disorder building walls no one could breach. Donora, with its quiet streets, became her refuge, her small home, a fortress where she lived alone, her only companions, her computer, and her thoughts. Writing became her escape, a way to process the pain that haunted her. But the stories she wrote were not of hope or healing. They were dark, disturbing, and dangerous in the eyes of those who would judge her. Red Rose Stories was Karen's creation, a website launched in the early 2000s that offered a glimpse into her fractured mind. For a $10 0-cent monthly subscription, users could access her fictional narratives, tales of child molestation, torture, and murder. The stories were graphic, unrelenting, their content so shocking it defied comprehension. To Karen, they were a form of catharsis, a way to externalize the horrors of her past, to reclaim control over her pain. She wrote under pseudonyms, her identity hidden, her audience small but loyal, a niche community of readers who found something in her words, whether solace, curiosity, or something darker. The site operated in obscurity, its existence known only to those who sought it out, until it caught the attention of a force far greater than Karen could have imagined. And that force was U.S. Attorney Mary Beth Buchanan, a prosecutor in Pittsburgh known for her crusades against vice. In 2005, Buchanan's office received a tip about Red Rose Stories, its content flagged as potential obscenity. Federal agents investigated, subscribing to the site, downloading its stories, and building a case that would thrust Karen into the spotlight. Obscenity laws, rooted in the 1973 Miller v. California decision, were rarely applied to written text, making the case a legal rarity. The Miller test defined obscenity as material that appealed to prurient interest, was patently offensive, and lacked serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Buchanan believed Karen's stories met these criteria. Their explicit depictions of child abuse crossing a line no society could tolerate. On February 10, 2006, the storm broke. Karen Fletcher was indicted on 6 counts of distributing obscene materials over the internet, each count tied to a specific story on Red Rose Stories. The charges were a shockwave not just for Karen, but for a nation grappling with the internet's uncharted frontiers. Donora, a town unused to scrutiny, buzzed with whispers as news of Karen's arrest spread. To her neighbors, she was an enigma, her quiet life at odds with the accusations. The media descended, painting her as a purveyor of depravity, her reclusive nature fuel for speculation. But the case was more than a local scandal. It was a test of America's commitment to free speech, a question of where the line between art and crime should be drawn. Karen's world unraveled. Her agoraphobia made the arrest a nightmare. The thought of leaving her home a terror greater than the charges. Federal agents had seized her computer, her stories, her sanctuary, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. She hired a defense team, led by attorneys who saw the case as a landmark battle. They argued that Red Rose Stories was protected speech, its fictional nature shielding it under the First Amendment. Karen's trauma, they said, was the key, her writing a therapeutic act, not a criminal one. They compared her work to literature like A Clockwork Orange or Lolita, provocative but valued for its artistic merit. The prosecution, led by Buchanan, countered with force, insisting the stories were not art, but exploitation. Their graphic detail a danger to society, And the case became a lightning rod, dividing legal scholars, activists, and the public. Free speech advocates rallied to Karen's side, warning that prosecuting written fiction could set a chilling precedent. If words alone could be criminal, they argued, what was safe? Writers, artists, and libertarians saw the case as a threat to creative expression, a step towards censorship in a digital age. On the other side, child protection groups and moral conservatives backed Buchanan, arguing that Karen's stories, even if fictional, could inspire real harm. They pointed to studies linking explicit content to deviant behavior, framing Red Rose stories as a public safety issue. The debate raged, each side digging in, as Karen, overwhelmed, retreated further into herself. The courtroom was a crucible, its air thick with tension as the case unfolded. Karen, frail and visibly shaken, appeared only when necessary, her health a constant concern. Her attorneys leaned heavily on her mental state, presenting medical records that detailed her PTSD, agoraphobia, and childhood abuse. Psychiatrists testified, describing her writing as a coping mechanism, a way to process trauma without harming others. These stories were her voice, one expert said, a scream in the dark, not a call to action. The defense summoned literary scholars who argued the stories, while disturbing, had narrative structure, a purpose beyond shock. They framed Karen as an artist, misunderstood, her work a reflection of pain, not intent. Buchanan's team was relentless, their case built on the story's raw impact. They read excerpts aloud, the words hanging heavy in the courtroom, jurors wincing at the graphic detail. Prosecutors argued the stories met the Miller test, appealing to prurient interests with no redeeming value. They called FBI agents who had infiltrated the site, their testimony detailing its subscriber base, small but global, a shadowed network of readers whose motives were suspect. The prosecution didn't claim Karen's stories had directly caused crimes, but they painted a picture of risk, of a digital world where dangerous ideas could spread unchecked. This is not about art, Buchanan declared. This is about protecting society from harm. The trial was brief, its outcome shaped not by a jury, but by Karen's fragility. Her health deteriorated under the strain, her agoraphobia making court appearances torturous. Her attorneys, fearing a trial's toll, negotiated a plea deal. In May 2008, Karen pleaded guilty to one count of distributing obscene materials, sparing her a full trial but admitting her stories crossed the legal line. The sentence was lenient. 5 years probation, 6 months home detention, and forfeiture of her computer. The courtroom was silent as the judge spoke, acknowledging Karen's trauma, but emphasizing the law's limits. Freedom of speech is not absolute, he said, his words a warning to others who might test those boundaries. Karen returned to Denora, her life quieter than ever, her website gone, her voice silenced. The plea deal was a victory for Buchanan, who saw it as a stand against digital depravity, but it left many unsatisfied. Free speech advocates decried the outcome, arguing it chilled creative expression, forcing writers to self-censor. Child protection groups, meanwhile, felt the sentence was too light, a missed chance to send a stronger message. Karen, caught between these forces, became a symbol of victimhood to some, of danger to others. Her neighbors, still puzzled, spoke of her in hushed tones, their quiet town forever linked to a case that shook the nation. The Fletcher case had lasting ripples. It exposed the internet's double edge, a platform for expression, but also for harm. Lawmakers debated tightening obscenity laws, though few changes followed. The First Amendment, a formidable shield. The case spurred discussions on mental health, with advocates calling for better support for trauma survivors, noting Karen's writing as a cry for help ignored. Literary circles grappled with the ethics of provocative fiction, questioning where art ends and responsibility begins. Denora, a footnote in the saga, returned to its quiet rhythm, but Karen's story lingered, a shadow in its streets. Legally, the case was a rarity, one of few prosecutions targeting written text. It highlighted the Miller test's ambiguity, its reliance on community standards, a challenge in a global digital age. Scholars pointed to the plea deal as a compromise, avoiding a precedent that could have reshaped free speech law. For Karen, the outcome was both mercy and punishment, freedom, but at the cost of her voice. She lived out her probation in isolation, her health fragile, her story a cautionary tale for those who navigate the line between expression and excess. The case also raised deeper questions. Was Karen a victim of her past? Her stories a desperate attempt to heal? Or was she a danger? Her words a spark that could ignite real harm? The truth, as always, lay in the gray. Her defenders saw a woman broken by abuse, her writing a private act twisted into a public crime. Her critics saw a line crossed, a responsibility ignored. The debate continues, a reflection of a society wrestling with its values, freedom versus safety, art versus morality, the individual versus the collective. Karen's voice, once loud in its darkness, is silent now, but its echoes challenge us still. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Karen Fletcher whispers through the shadows, a tale of a woman whose words became a battlefield in a nation forced to judge the unjudgeable. It asks us to consider the power of stories, the pain they carry, and the limits we place on freedom. Karen's home in Denora stands quiet, her secrets locked within, but her case endures, a question mark in America's heart. Close your eyes, let the storm carry her story away, and wonder, where do we draw the line when words become weapons? Part 9. Joseph Jihad Jack. Thomas, yo first job, February 2006. In the balmy summer of February 2006, Melbourne, Australia, pulsed with the rhythm of a city at ease. Its trams rattled through vibrant streets, its people savoring the warmth of a southern hemisphere sun. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a shadow was falling, one that would test Australia's resolve in a new age of fear. At its heart was Joseph Thomas, a 32-year-old husband and father, an ordinary man whose choices thrust him into the crucible of history. Branded Jihad Jack by a relentless media, he became the first Australian convicted under the nation's fledgling anti-terrorism laws. His story, a maze of ideology, coercion, and a justice system struggling to balance security with freedom. This is the tale of Joseph Thomas, a journey from suburbia to the edge of terror, and a nation forced to confront the price of his vigilance. Joseph Thomas was not the figure you'd imagine at the center of a terrorism scandal. Born in 1973 to a middle-class Melbourne family, he was a quiet, unassuming man, his life marked by ordinary struggles. A convert to Islam in his early 20s, he found solace in faith, his devotion shaping a life of prayer and community. By 2001, he was married to Mariati, an Indonesian-Australian woman, and working as a butcher, his days filled with the routines of family life. But beneath his calm exterior burned a restlessness, a yearning to understand the world beyond Melbourne's suburbs. The events of September 11, 2001 would ignite that spark, sending him on a path that would change everything. In the wake of 9/11, the world shifted, and Thomas felt its tremors. The U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan, the rise of Al-Qaeda, the global clash of ideologies, it all stirred something in him. He wasn't radicalized in the traditional sense, not yet, but he was curious, drawn to the idea of jihad as a call to defend his faith. In early 2001, before the towers fell, he traveled to Pakistan, seeking to study at a religious school. His journey led him to Afghanistan, where the Taliban held sway and Al-Qaeda's influence was growing. There, in a remote training camp, Thomas stepped into a world he barely understood, a world of ideology and violence that would haunt him for years. The camp was no Hollywood vision of terror. It was grueling, chaotic, a mix of fervent recruits and hardened fighters. Thomas, a novice, trained in basic combat, his motives a blend of idealism and naivety. He later claimed he sought knowledge, not violence, but his presence in the camp was enough to mark him. He met figures linked to Al-Qaeda, including, allegedly, Osama bin Laden himself, though Thomas downplayed the encounter as fleeting. By late 2001, as U.S. forces invaded Afghanistan, the camp dissolved and Thomas fled, crossing into Pakistan with thousands of others. His dream of spiritual clarity had become a nightmare, and the shadows of his choices were closing in. In January 2003, Thomas's world collapsed. Pakistani authorities working with U.S. intelligence arrested him in Karachi, suspecting him of ties to Al-Qaeda. He was held in a secret facility, his fate uncertain. For weeks, he endured interrogation, his captors pressing for confessions. Thomas, isolated and terrified, spoke of his time in Afghanistan, his words recorded without a lawyer present. The conditions were harsh. Sleep deprivation, threats, a relentless push for answers. He admitted to training at the camp, to receiving money from Al-Qaeda operatives, to holding a falsified passport. These confessions, extracted under duress, would become the cornerstone of his downfall, a truth twisted by coercion. Australia, alerted to Thomas's arrest, faced a dilemma. The nation was reeling from the 2002 Bali bombings, which killed 88 Australians, and public fear of terrorism was at a fever pitch. New anti-terrorism laws passed in 2002 gave authorities sweeping powers, including the ability to prosecute citizens for foreign terrorist activities. Thomas, a Melbourne native, was a test case. His arrest a chance to flex these laws. In November 2004, he was deported to Australia, where federal police were waiting, charged with receiving funds from a terrorist organization and possessing a falsified passport. He became the first Australian to face trial under the new laws. His name splashed across headlines as Jihad Jack. Melbourne was stunned. Thomas was no firebrand, no radical preaching hate. He was a local, a man who'd lived quietly among them. His family, devastated, insisted he was misguided, not malevolent. His journey, a search for meaning, gone awry. But the media painted a darker picture, their Jihad Jack moniker branding him a traitor. Public opinion hardened, fear outweighing nuance. The case tapped into a broader anxiety. Australia, a nation far from the Middle East, was not immune to the specter of terrorism. Thomas, whether villain or victim, became a symbol of that fear, his trial a battleground for a nation's soul. The trial began in February 2006, and it was a crucible of tension. The courtroom was packed, reporters capturing every word, the public watching with bated breath. Prosecutors, led by the Commonwealth, built their case on Thomas's confessions, playing recordings of his Pakistani interrogations. He admitted to training at an Al-Qahar's camp, to accepting $3,500 0 cents from operatives, to using a fake passport to travel. These, they argued, were acts of intent, proof he was a willing participant in terrorism. They painted him as a sleeper agent, his ordinary life a cover for dangerous ambitions. Joseph Thomas chose to align with our enemies, the lead prosecutor declared, his voice a call to vigilance. The defense, led by seasoned attorneys, fought back with ferocity. They argued the confessions were coerced, extracted under conditions that violated Thomas's rights. No lawyer, no warnings, no freedom. These, they said, rendered the statements inadmissible. They called experts who testified to the psychological toll of detention, the pressure that could break even the innocent. Thomas's time in Afghanistan, they argued, was a misadventure, not a commitment to terror. He had never fought, never planned attacks, never harmed anyone. His acceptance of money was for survival, his passport a desperate bid to escape a war zone. This is not a terrorist, his lawyer insisted. This is a man who made a mistake and paid dearly for it. Thomas took the stand, his voice steady but heavy with regret. He spoke of his faith, his curiosity, his naivety in seeking answers abroad. He described the camp as a mistake, a place he left when its reality became clear. The interrogations, he said, were a blur of fear, his words shaped by captors who wanted a narrative. I never wanted to hurt anyone, he told the jury, his eyes searching for understanding. But the prosecution was relentless, cross-examining him with precision, highlighting inconsistencies, pressing on his meetings with Al-Qaeda figures. The jury, a mix of Melbourne locals, listened intently, their faces unreadable, the weight of history on their shoulders. The trial's heart was the confessions. The defense argued they were tainted, a violation of legal standards. Prosecutors countered that Thomas spoke freely, his admissions consistent with other evidence, travel records, witness accounts from Pakistan, even his own writings. The judge, tasked with ruling on admissibility, faced a dilemma. Australia's anti-terrorism laws were new, untested, their boundaries unclear. Admitting coerced evidence risked setting a dangerous precedent, but excluding it could weaken the case, letting a potential threat walk free. The courtroom was a microcosm of a nation grappling with fear versus fairness, security versus rights. The verdict came on February 26, 2006, and it was a blow to Thomas. The judge admitted the confessions, ruling they were sufficiently voluntary. The jury, after days of deliberation, found him guilty on 2 counts, receiving funds from a terrorist organization and possessing a falsified passport. The courtroom was silent, Thomas's family weeping as the judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison with credit for time served. The media erupted. Jihad Jack, now a convicted terrorist, his story a warning of the enemy within. But the victory was hollow, the case exposing flaws that would soon unravel it. Thomas's legal team appealed, arguing the confessions were a miscarriage of justice. In August 2006, the Victorian Court of Appeal agreed, overturning the conviction. The court ruled the Pakistani interrogations violated Thomas's rights. No lawyer, no caution, clear coercion. The evidence, they said, was inadmissible. The trial tainted. Thomas was released on bail, his freedom a fleeting triumph. But the government wasn't done. Prosecutors vowed to retry him, and in the interim, they imposed a control order, one of Australia's first, restricting his movements, his contacts, his life. He was free, but not truly. His every step watched. His name forever Jihad Jack. The retrial never came. By 2008, with new evidence scarce and public attention fading, the case was dropped. Thomas's control order was lifted, but the damage was done. His marriage strained, his reputation ruined. He lived in the shadow of suspicion. Austria, too, was changed. The case exposed the limits of its anti-terrorism laws, the risks of relying on foreign obtained evidence, the tension between security and civil liberties. Legal reforms followed, tightening rules on confessions, clarifying rights in terrorism cases. The public, once gripped by fear, began to question the Jihad Jack label, seeing in Thomas a man caught in a storm larger than himself. The Thomas case raised haunting questions. Was he a terrorist, a man who flirted with danger and paid the price? Or was he a victim, a naive soul ensnared by circumstance and a system eager for a scapegoat? The truth lies in the gray. His time in Afghanistan was reckless, his choices questionable, but no evidence showed he planned harm. His confessions, born of fear, were a reminder of justice's fragility in times of panic. Australia, a nation that prided itself on fairness, had stumbled, its rush to convict exposing cracks in its legal soul. Thomas rebuilt quietly, staying out of the spotlight, his faith and family his anchors. Melbourne moved on, its streets vibrant again, but the case lingered, a cautionary tale of fear's power. It spurred debates on radicalization, on how ordinary men are drawn to extremes, and on how societies respond without losing their values. Thomas' journey, from suburbia to a camp, from freedom to a cell, was a mirror, reflecting a world wrestling with terror's shadow. His story, once a headline, is now a whisper, but its lessons endure. A call to balance, vigilance with humanity. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Joseph Jihad Jack Thomas whispers through the shadows, a tale of a man who wandered too far in a nation that judged him in fear. It asks us to consider the cost of labels, the weight of truth under pressure, and the strength it takes to rebuild. Thomas's face, once plastered across screens, is faded now, but his case remains, a question mark in Australia's heart. Close your eyes, let the storm carry his story away, and wonder, how do we find justice when fear writes the rules? Part 10, Munir Saeed Talib, assassination 2004-2006. In the humid twilight of September 7, 2004, Jakarta's Soekarno-Hatta International Airport buzzed with the rhythm of a city on the move. Amid the throngs of travelers was Munir Saeed Talib, a 38-year-old human rights activist whose courage had made him a beacon in Indonesia's young democracy. With his gentle smile and unyielding resolve, Munir was a voice for the voiceless, a man who challenged the powerful and exposed the sins of a nation's past. That night, he boarded Garuda, Indonesia, flight GA974, bound for Amsterdam to pursue a master's degree, his heart full of hope for a better future. But somewhere above the clouds, a shadow was waiting, and Munir's journey would end in silence, his death a wound that would galvanize Indonesia and expose the dark reach of power. This is the story of Munir Saeed Talib's assassination, a tale of bravery, betrayal, and a nation's unrelenting quest for... Munir was no ordinary man. Born in 1965 in East Java, he grew up in the shadow of Indonesia's authoritarian Suharto regime, a time when dissent was crushed and fear ruled. A lawyer by training, he found his calling in human rights, founding organizations like Contra to document abuses and demand accountability. His work was fearless, investigating military atrocities in East Timor, exposing disappearances of activists, challenging the elites who clung to power after Suharto's fall in 1998. Munir's voice was a clarion call, his reports a mirror to Indonesia's conscience. He received death threats, his family lived under constant watch, yet he pressed on, driven by a belief that truth could heal a fractured nation. By 2004, Indonesia was a democracy in transition, its people tasting freedom but grappling with the ghosts of its past. The military and intelligence agencies, once untouchable, still wielded influence, their loyalty to reform uncertain. Munir, with his relentless advocacy, was a thorn in their side, his investigations threatening to unravel secrets buried in blood. He was preparing to study law in the Netherlands, a chance to sharpen his tools for justice, when he boarded flight GA 974. To his supporters, he was a hero, departing on a mission. To his enemies, he was a target. His departure, a chance to silence him forever. The flight began like any other, the Boeing 747 climbing into the night sky, its passengers settling in for the long journey. Munir, seated in economy, was polite, unassuming, chatting with fellow travelers. Among them was Polikarpus Budahari Prianto, an off-duty Garuda pilot who approached Munir with an offer. A seat in business class, a gesture of courtesy. Munir, grateful, accepted. Unaware that Polikarpus was no ordinary pilot, his presence on the flight was no coincidence, his actions part of a plan that would unfold with chilling precision. Hours into the flight, Munir began to feel ill, his discomfort growing as the plane soared over Asia. By the time it landed in Amsterdam, he was dead, his body a silent testament to a crime that would shake Indonesia to its core. The news of Munir's death reached Jakarta like a thunderbolt. His wife, Suciwati, and colleagues were stunned, their grief tempered by suspicion. Munir was healthy, his life one of purpose, not frailty. An autopsy in the Netherlands revealed the truth. He had been poisoned with arsenic, a lethal dose administered during the flight. The poison worked slowly, its effect mimicking natural illness, a method both cruel and calculated. Indonesia erupted in mourning and outrage, its streets filled with protesters demanding answers. Munir was more than a man. He was a symbol, his death a direct attack on the nation's democratic hopes. The question was not just who killed him, but who had the power to orchestrate such a crime. When the investigation began under intense pressure, Indonesia's police and government facing a public desperate for justice, early clues pointed to the flight, with Polikarpus emerging as a key figure. His offer of the business class seat, his presence on a flight he wasn't scheduled to work, raised red flags. Investigators dug deeper, uncovering his ties to Indonesia's state intelligence agency, with BIN, a shadowy organization with a history of suppressing dissent. Phone records showed Polikarpus making calls to BIN officials before and during the flight, their content cryptic but damning. A Garuda flight attendant reported seeing him near Munir's seat, his behavior odd, his purpose unclear. The arsenic forensic experts confirmed was likely slipped into Munir's food or drink, a task requiring access and intent. Polikarpus was arrested in 2005, charged with premeditated murder and conspiracy. The case against him was compelling but fraught with obstacles. BIN's involvement loomed large, its operatives insulated by power and secrecy. Witnesses hesitated, their fear of retaliation palpable. Evidence vanished, documents were altered, and the investigation faced resistance from within the government itself. Munir's supporters, led by Suciwati, refused to relent, their protests a constant pressure on authorities. They saw the case as a test of Indonesia's democracy, a chance to prove the nation could hold its powerful accountable. The trial, they hoped, would be a reckoning, not just for Polikarpus, but for the forces behind him. The trial began in December 2005, and it was a battleground of truth and obfuscation. The courtroom was packed, activists and reporters watching every move, the air heavy with expectation. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, detailing Polikarpus' actions, his seat swap, his BIN connections, his calls. Forensic evidence confirmed the arsenic, its timing aligned with Munir's symptoms. A key witness, a Garuda employee, testified to Polikarpus' suspicious behavior, though fear tinged her words. The prosecution argued he was a cog in a larger machine, acting on orders from BIN to eliminate a threat. Munir was killed because he dared to speak, the lead prosecutor said, his voice a call to justice. Polikarpus' defense was defiant, claiming he was a scapegoat, his presence on the flight a coincidence. His lawyers questioned the evidence, noting gaps in the chain of custody, inconsistencies in witness accounts. They argued the arsenic could have come from elsewhere, a desperate bid to sow doubt. Polikarpus took the stand, his demeanor calm, denying any role in Munir's death. "I am a pilot, not a killer," he said, his words met with skepticism. The defense hinted at a broader conspiracy, but stopped short of naming BIN, their caution a nod to the agency's power. The jury, a panel of judges in Indonesia's system, listened intently, their task daunting in a nation where justice often bent to influence. The verdict, delivered on December 20, 2005, was a moment of hope. Polycarpus was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to 14 years, a significant victory for Munir's supporters. The courtroom erupted, Suciwati weeping, activists chanting for justice, but the triumph was short-lived. In October 2006, Indonesia's Supreme Court overturned the conviction, citing insufficient evidence. The decision sparked outrage, protesters flooding Jakarta's streets, accusing the court of bowing to Bin's influence. The case, they feared, would join countless others in Indonesia's history, where truth was buried by power. Suciwati, undeterred, vowed to fight on, her resolve a beacon for a nation weary of corruption. The public's fury forced action. A judicial review, rare in Indonesia, was launched and new evidence emerged, additional phone records, witness testimonies that had been suppressed. In January 2008, the Supreme Court reversed its ruling, reinstating Polycarpus's conviction and increasing his sentence to 20 years. The decision was a landmark, proof that persistence could challenge even the most entrenched powers. Yet, the victory was incomplete. No senior Bin officials were prosecuted, their names whispered but untouchable. Investigations pointed to high-ranking figures, but evidence was elusive, their trails covered by a system skilled in secrecy. Munir's killers, it seemed, were not just one man, but a shadow that stretched far beyond. In the Munir case transformed Indonesia, it galvanized the human rights movement, with activists like Suciwati carrying his torch, their demands for transparency reshaping the nation's discourse. Contras and other groups grew stronger, their investigations exposing more abuses, their voices a reminder of Munir's legacy. The case spurred reforms in Indonesia's judicial system, with calls for greater independence, though progress was slow. Whether Indonesia faced scrutiny, its security protocols tightened, its reputation tarnished by its role in the tragedy. The public, once resigned to impunity, found hope in the case's outcome, a belief that justice, however delayed, was possible. Yet, the scars remained. Suciwati, a widow-turned-warrior, lived with constant threats, her courage a testament to love and loss. Munir's children grew up without a father, his absence a quiet ache. Indonesia, a nation striving for democracy, faced the reality of its fragility. Powerful forces still lurked, ready to silence those who dared to speak. The case became a symbol, taught in schools, debated in cafes, its lessons a call to vigilance. Munir's face, with its gentle smile, adorned posters and murals, his name a rallying cry for those who believed in truth. The legal aftermath saw Polycarpus serve his sentence, his role as a pawn in a larger game a bitter irony. Appeals followed, each denied, his conviction a rare crack in Bin's armor. Speculation about the agency's involvement persisted, with declassified documents hinting at orders from above, though none were conclusive. Activists pushed for a truth commission, a chance to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy, but political will faltered, the past too heavy to unearth. Munir's death, like so many in Indonesia's history, remained a partial mystery, its truth buried in shadows only the powerful could see. The case also raised broader questions. How do you fight a system that kills its critics? How do you honor a man whose death exposed a nation's flaws? Munir was not perfect. His relentlessness made enemies. His focus on the past alienated some, but his courage was undeniable. He knew the risks, yet he spoke. His life a challenge to apathy. Indonesia, in mourning him, found strength, its people refusing to let his death be in vain. The arsenic that in his life was a weapon, but his legacy was a shield, protecting those who carried his fight forward. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Munir Said Khalib whispers through the shadows, a tale of a man who dared to speak and a nation that refused to forget. It asks us to consider the cost of truth, the power of courage, and the strength it takes to challenge the untouchable. Munir's voice is silent now, but his spirit endures, a light in Indonesia's heart. Polycarpus, a name tied to betrayal, fades into obscurity, but the questions he left behind remain, a call to seek justice where shadows reign. Close your eyes, let the storm carry Munir's story away, and wonder, what would you risk to speak the truth? Part 11, Alberto Adriano murder, Germany, June 2000. In the soft twilight of June 10th, 2000, the city of Dessau, Germany, lay bathed in the warmth of early summer. Nestled along the Elbe River, Dessau was a place of history and charm, its parks and cobblestone streets a haven for families and dreamers. Among its residents was Alberto Adriano, a 39-year-old Mozambican immigrant who had built a life far from his homeland. Father of three, a worker at a meat processing plant, Adriano was a man of quiet dignity. his smile a bridge between cultures. But that night, as he walked through City Park, a darkness descended, born of hatred and fueled by venom. 3 young men, steeped in neo-Nazi ideology, would steal Adriano's life in an act so brutal it would shake Germany to its core, forcing a nation to confront the specter of racism that refused to die. This is the story of Alberto Adriano's murder, a tale of loss, rage, and a fight for a future free of hate. Alberto Adriano was a man who carried his roots with pride. Born in Mozambique, a nation scarred by colonial rule and civil war, he came to East Germany in the 1980s as a contract worker, part of a program that brought Africans to the German Democratic Republic. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, Adriano stayed, choosing Dessau as his home. He learned German, married a local woman, and raised 3 children, their laughter the heartbeat of his modest apartment. At the meat processing plant, he was respected, his strong hands and steady demeanor earning him friends among colleagues. To his neighbors, he was a familiar face, a man who greeted them with warmth. His journey from Africa to Germany a testament to resilience. But Dessau, like much of post-reunification East Germany, was a place of tension. The fall of communism brought economic hardship, and with it, a resurgence of far-right extremism. Neo-Nazi groups, fueled by resentment and xenophobia, found fertile ground in towns like Dessau, where unemployment and disillusionment bred anger. Immigrants, particularly Black and African residents, became targets, their presence a scapegoat for societal woes. As Adriano, with his dark skin and foreign accent, was no stranger to hostility, slurs whispered in passing, glances that lingered too long. Yet he carried on, his faith in humanity stronger than the hatred he faced, his life a quiet rebuke to those who saw him as less. On that June evening, Adriano was in City Park, a green oasis where locals gathered to unwind. It was a Saturday, the air alive with the hum of summer, children playing, couples strolling, the world at ease. Adriano, perhaps on his way home from a friend's, walked alone, his thoughts his own. He didn't know that 3 young men, Henrik H., Frank M., and Christian R., were watching, their minds clouded by alcohol and ideology. Aged 16 to 24, they were products of Dessau's underbelly, drawn to the neo-Nazi scene that thrived in the shadows. Shaved heads, swastika tattoos, and a shared belief in racial superiority defined them. To them, Adriano was not a father, not a worker, not a man. He was a symbol of everything they despised. The attack was sudden, ferocious, a storm of hatred unleashed without warning. Henrik, the oldest and most volatile, led the charge, his fists fueled by rage. Frank and Christian followed, their drunken bravado masking cowardice. They surrounded Adriano, their slurs cutting through the night. Racial epithets, taunts of "go back to Africa." Adriano, caught off guard, had no chance to flee. The blows came fast, the punches to his face, kicks to his body, a relentless assault that drove him to the ground. They stomped on his head, their boots a weapon of annihilation, each strike an act of erasure. Adriano's cries, if he made any, were lost in the park's silence, his life slipping away under the weight of their hatred. The trio fled, leaving Adriano broken on the grass, their laughter a chilling echo. A passerby found him hours later, his body still, his blood staining the earth. Paramedics rushed him to a hospital, but the damage was catastrophic. Skull fractures, brain trauma, a body battered beyond repair. Adriano lingered in a coma, his family at his bedside, their prayers a desperate plea. On June 13, 2000, he died, his heart stopping 3 days after the attack. Dessau, a city unaccustomed to such violence, was plunged into grief and disbelief, its residents gathering at the park, their candles a fragile light against the darkness. The police response was swift, driven by a community demanding justice. Detectives canvassed the park, finding witnesses who'd seen 3 young men fleeing, their descriptions matching the neo-Nazi profile. Tips poured in, pointing to Henrik, Frank, and Christian, known troublemakers with ties to far-right groups. Their arrest came within days, their bravado crumbling under interrogation. Henrik, the ringleader, admitted to the attack, his words laced with defiance, claiming Adriano didn't belong. Frank and Christian, younger and less hardened, confessed, their accounts a mix of regret and justification. The evidence was overwhelming, blood on their boots, witnesses placing them at the scene, their own words sealing their fate. Germany was shaken. The murder came amid a wave of far-right violence, with the National Socialist Underground, NNSU, and other groups targeting minorities across the country. Adriano's death was not just a local tragedy, but a national crisis, a reminder that the poison of Nazism lingered decades after World War II. Protests erupted in Dessau and beyond, thousands marching against racism, their signs demanding never. Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder attended Adriano's funeral, his presence a rare gesture, his words a call for unity. Alberto Adriano was one of us, and his death diminishes us all. The nation mourned, but mourning was not enough. Germany needed answers. The trial began in 2001, and it was a crucible for Dessau. The courtroom was packed, activists and reporters watching, Adriano's family a silent presence, their grief a heavy weight. Prosecutors presented a harrowing case detailing the attack's brutality, dozens of blows, a skull shattered, a life erased for no reason but race. Forensic evidence confirmed the trio's guilt, blood and DNA linking them to the scene. Witnesses recounted the attack's ferocity, one describing Henrik's animalistic rage, another the chilling laughter that followed. The prosecution argued the murder was a hate crime, its motive rooted in neo-Nazi ideology, its impact a wound to Germany's soul. The defense, representing Henrik, Frank, and Christian separately, offered little resistance. Henrik's lawyer claimed alcohol clouded his judgment, a weak excuse against the evidence of intent. Frank and Christian, juveniles at the time, leaned on their youth, arguing they followed Henrik's lead, their actions not premeditated. The courtroom bristled at their claims, the gallery filled with Adriano's supporters, their anger palpable. Adriano's widow took the stand, her voice steady but breaking, describing a husband who loved his children, who worked for their future, who deserved to live. They took him because of his skin, she said, her words a dagger to the heart. And the trial exposed the roots of the trio's hatred. Henrik, 24, was a product of East Germany's post-reunification struggles, his anger channeled into neo-Nazism by older recruiters. Frank, 17, and Christian, 16, were impressionable, drawn to the movement's promise of belonging. They attended far-right rallies, consumed propaganda, and embraced violence as a badge of honor. Their affiliations with groups like the NSU, later linked to a string of murders, underscored the broader threat. Prosecutors called experts who testified to the rise of extremism, warning that Adriano's death was not isolated, but part of a pattern Germany could not ignore. The verdict, delivered in late 2001, was a moment of reckoning. Henrik was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. His role as the attack's leader undeniable. Frank and Christian, tried as juveniles, received 9 years each in detention. Their youth a factor, but not an excuse. The courtroom exhaled, Adriano's family weeping, their relief tempered by loss. Dessau's residents gathered outside, their chants a mix of triumph and sorrow. The sentences were seen as just, but they could not erase the pain. Germany, watching, felt the weight of its history, the echoes of its past, a reminder that hatred was a battle never fully won. But the Adrian case had profound ripple effects. It galvanized Germany's fight against far-right extremism, prompting new laws to curb hate groups. Funding for anti-racism programs surged, with schools and communities teaching tolerance to counter propaganda. The NSU's later exposure, revealing a network of murders, owed much to the scrutiny Adriano's death brought. Dessau became a symbol, its park a site of pilgrimage, where a memorial stone now stands, inscribed with Adriano's name and a plea for peace. Annual vigils honor him, his children, now adults, carrying his legacy of resilience. Yet the case also exposed Germany's challenges. East Germany, with its economic struggles, remained a breeding ground for extremism, its youth vulnerable to hate's allure. Immigrants continued to face hostility, their safety a work in progress. Adriano's family, particularly his widow, bore the weight of loss, their lives forever altered. The trial, while a victory, left questions unanswered. How had neo-Nazism grown so bold, and what systems failed to stop it? Germany, a nation proud of its post-war transformation, faced the reality that its work was not done, its unity tested by those who clung to division. The legal aftermath saw Henrik serve his life sentence, his appeals denied, his name a byword for hatred. Frank and Christian, released in their 20s, faded into obscurity, their futures uncertain. The far right, though weakened, persisted, its ideology a shadow that flared in moments of unrest. Adriano's death became a touchstone cited in debates on immigration, integration, and justice. It spurred policy changes, stricter monitoring of hate groups, better support for minority communities. but progress was uneven, the scars of history deep. The case raised haunting questions. How does a nation heal from hatred's wounds? How do you honor a man whose life was stolen by prejudice? Adriano was not a public figure, not a hero in the traditional sense, but his death made him one. His quiet dignity, his love for his family, his choice to build a life in a foreign land, these were acts of courage, a rebuke to those who saw him as less. Germany, in mourning him, found strength. Its people refusing to let his death define them. The park where he died is now a place of reflection, its trees whispering his name, its memorial a call to fight for a world where no one is judged by their skin. As the rain falls tonight, the story of Alberto Adriano whispers through the shadows, a tale of a man whose life was stolen and a nation that rose to honor him. It asks us to consider the roots of hatred, the power of unity, and the strength it takes to build a future free of fear. Adriano's smile, once a light in Dessau, is gone, but his memory endures, a beacon in Germany's heart. Lenrich, Frank, and Christian, names tied to shame, fade into the past, but the questions they left behind remain. A call to stand against prejudice. Close your eyes, let the storm carry Adriano's story away, and wonder, what will we do to ensure no one else falls to hate? These stories, though rooted in different corners of the world, share a common thread: the human capacity for both destruction and redemption. They linger in the quiet moments, in the spaces where rain meets memory, asking us to reflect on the choices we make, the truths we seek, and the shadows we leave behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey through shadows of the past. If these tales have stirred your soul, if they've sparked a question or a shiver, subscribe and share to keep the shadows alive. Until the next storm calls, let the rain wash away the weight of these stories, and may the past find peace in the silence of the night.